Mayor Killian.
Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome all of you all. Thank you for coming today. I guess we will start with a roll call. Kim, if you'll please call the roll.
Mr. Austin.
I'm present.
Ms. Quetch. Here. Mr. Webb.
Here.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Here.
And Mayor Pillion.
Here. Okay, now we will move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. This time it is my turn to lead it. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, any discussion? So the motion was made by Ms. Quetch and seconded by Mr. Austin. No discussion. Kim, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch. Aye. Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Pillion.
Aye. Okay, public comments are next on the agenda, and we have Michael Henningsen, who is signed up for public comments today.
Michael Henningsen, 18424 Cashmere Court, Abingdon, Virginia. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, thank you. Years ago, my son and I were on a camp out at the muster grounds, and I was volunteered to tell a ghost story. At that time, I knew nothing of the stories that lived there, so I explored around the grounds to find a good story. And what I found was a treasure trove of stories. Stories of early pioneers who had carved out our independence. I also found inspirational stories of the volunteers and organizations who shaped the muster grounds to give voice to the stories that lived there. I was recruited to the cause. And so my adventure began. When a tourism position opened up at the muster grounds, I jumped on it. That volunteer sense of satisfaction and responsibility of giving voice to the stories got a hold of me. The pandemic hit and the voices of the muster grounds were silent, and we all felt a great sense of loss as we removed our storytelling tools and the doors were locked tight. As pandemic concerns lifted last year, a memo of understanding was arranged with the OVTA to breathe new life into the muster grounds. On behalf of the OVTA, I can happily report that through the efforts of the OVTA and partner organizations, the Interpretive Center has reopened with limited hours and events, but surpassing the expectations of the MOU. Special thanks to Tanya and the Tourism Department for their encouragement and support. Also to report is much of the muster grounds and trailhead remain inaccessible or are in disrepair for the purposes intended. To address these concerns, a list of projects was submitted to Gabe Christofari and Matt Henderson. Many of those projects do not require special approval under the DHR easements, and volunteers are stepping up to help. These projects were approved, however, with a caveat. Funds must be raised by your organization. From discussions with the OVTA, partner organizations, and the Park Service Historic Trail Administrator, it was recommended that a community nonprofit organization dedicated to the muster grounds could offer a partnership that would help coordinate programming and bring additional resources to the muster grounds. To that end, these organizations have joined resources to form the Muster Grounds Committee Incorporated, a Virginia nonprofit corporation. Corporation has not yet filed for tax exemption as we're planning our initial founders meeting and would like to include a member of this council or your designee. There are already a number of other nonprofits such as the Barter Foundation, Abingdon Farmers Market, Arts Depot, Rotary. You're all familiar with that. So in keeping, the Muster Grounds Committee would like to be your partner to develop the Abingdon Muster Grounds to be the sustainable public access center for conservation, recreation, and historic preservation interpretation that it was intended to be, giving voice to the stories that live there.
That is wonderful. Okay, then I think that's something that we can discuss and.
That would be wonderful.
Yes.
This was handing you the dance card, can we dance together, basically.
Okay.
All right, super. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Okay, no other public comments, and we don't have any proclamations. We do have a public hearing. It's for an easement that is described as access easement for parcel 7, the Meadows, beginning on a point located in the southerly right-of-way line of Cook Street. Right-of-way varies, common corner between parcel 7 of the Meadows subdivision, Plat Book 79, page 2, and Abingdon, Virginia property, Plat Book 80, page 45. I don't need to read the whole thing. Okay, that's awesome.
As applied, as
Okay.
on the agenda.
Good. That's great. Okay. I'm happy to not read the whole thing. Thank you. And so I will now open the public hearing.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. So what we have here is Marathon Realty is requesting a permanent easement for the future development of Lot 7 within the Meadows development. So in your packet, you can see where Lot 7 is proposed to have a future retail space. And it's proposed at this time for about 16,570 square feet. And Lot 7 right now is encumbered by the roundabout. So it does not actually have direct access to the public street for an access point. And so one of the points that they're looking at accessing Cook Street from is their neighbor adjoining the one side. And then what they're requesting from you is access through the town's property to their neighbor on the other side. When the, without having a positive motion for this easement, this lot wouldn't be able to be developed with retail as they're proposing. It's always kind of a chicken and the egg. I know we experienced one of these before with one of the downtown buildings that wanted to put steps out over the sidewalk. And it was like, does it go to Planning Commission first, or HPRB in that case? Does it come to you all first? And so they're coming to you first to ask for the easement. When a development is to go actually on that site, they will have to go through the Planning Commission for that review and approval. So today is not a question about what is going on that site or what that site design would ultimately look like. What they're asking for is to be able to have access for 1,438.8 square feet. And it would be a motion for an easement across parcel 105A39, which is within the property commonly referred to as the Meadows Sports Complex. Representative from Marathon Realty is here today if you wish to have any questions to them or if there's anything I can answer.
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Are there any citizens who would like to speak on behalf of this issue? If there are not, then I will now close the public hearing. We have a resolution to discuss, which is granting the easement that we previously talked about. And if there are no questions, do we have a motion to accept this resolution?
I would so move that we approve the resolution which grants this easement.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Austin and a second by Vice Mayor Anderson. Is there any discussion?
Just for the record, since Food City is my employer, I will have to abstain from voting.
Okay. Any further discussion? If not, Kim, will you please call the roll for a vote?
Certainly, Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Abstain.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Pilion.
Aye. Okay, so the motion passes. We have no first reading of ordinances. We do have a second reading of ordinances, and it is an ordinance of the council for the town of Abingdon proposing a budget to make appropriation for the current expenses and to fix a tax rate upon real and personal property for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023 and ending June 30th, 2024. And so I will now have our town manager, Mike Cochran, take over.
Sure. Thanks.
Here's the PowerPoint, I think. Yeah, start development. Sorry, I thought it was automatic. There we go. Good morning or good afternoon. I did not do that. So this is a reiteration of what we went over a few weeks ago as far as the proposed budget for the next fiscal year. And as part of this process, we had a workshop in January where I obtained general vision and desires from council. And then from that, I met with staff and the different department heads in order to come up with this process. And it's largely a carryover budget. There's not a lot of new things in the budget. The thing is, we've had pardon me, when I came in here, right at a little over a year ago now, we had a large hurdle. We had almost like a $2 million fund balance potential usage and a $200,000 ARPA money potential usage. And that was a big hole to fill. And so we had a very good year, but also a very challenging year in that we obviously didn't want to spend the money that was completely budgeted. What we did do in this budget that we're finishing was we added, there was 2 paid firemen that were added there, and part of that is just improving response times because we want to be able to have someone on at the fire station, be able to activate the truck in order to get the water on the fire as quickly as possible. And so that was done with this year. We also had an assistant town manager position that was in the budget but wasn't funded, and so I filled that position internally and then promoted internally. But that position was done this year, and then we added a position to oversee and manage the meadows was added. As you know, the meadows opened last May, I believe, and there was a lot of unknowns because it was new, and it's a large facility and a rather fancy facility, really nice actually. And so we had to do a couple things to make sure what it takes to manage that, because those fields, if you don't maintain those, they're expensive to build, they're really expensive to fix. So we have added a staff out there, plus as you know, we've had quite a few tournaments, Mother Nature willing, we had better tournaments rather than the ones last year that seemed to get rained out. And also within the budget, we also had this unknown of what's it going to take to maintain the meadows, not just manage it, but maintain it. So we have the staff out there is dedicated to that. And part of the thing with places like the meadows, it's specialty grass and specialty facilities. So as much as you think like, oh, I'll just send 2 guys with a mower over there, you can't, because the fields won't get maintained properly. And there's nothing against the guys that just mow regularly. It's just it's a specialty to be able to maintain the stuff looking like that. So our staff's been out there taking care of that. Also within this current budget, after the post-COVID, although I wasn't here, my understanding from talking with folks is that we had cut way back on what tourism did, and we've kind of recrafted how the town handles tourism. And so rather than us putting on events, we now sponsor events and facilitate events happening here in town. And actually at the end of the meeting, I've got something to mention on something coming up. So we're trying to do that, and rather than us be the person that always puts the things on. And then the other thing is on the Coombs Center. That was something that during the COVID was cut way back because of the infectious nature of the COVID and whatnot. And so the Coombs, they've really gotten after it. And so from March 1, 2022, they've gone up about 700 memberships in that 1 year period, which is huge on top of what they had. And then they've also added 11,855 day passes, which is a tremendous amount. And part of that is we replaced the diving board that needed some fixing. So we replaced the diving board and brought back the high school sports and brought back some of the competitive swimming that we didn't have before. And so we've done a lot to try and utilize the amenity. We recognize that both are expensive to have, but they're 2 of the biggest crown jewels in Southwest Virginia. And so we want to be able to utilize those as much as we can. Yeah, so this, continuing on with the accomplishments out at the Coombs, we implemented the CAS team, which is the local swim team, and then the high school swim team meets there. The Pump and Skills track, that was an idea that had started last, I guess, May-ish, something of that lines. We've been able to identify funding for that, and construction should be starting any day now, and that's on that last piece of land out there at the Meadows, the last little piece that was an ice water land. And then restore the Vanderpools to Cumming Street, we're in that process right now. Those things are all in process. The splash pad has been completed, and that's operational and being used every day except for a rainy day. The special events, we've had Halloween on Main Street. That was something that staff brought up, and the unique thing with the Halloween on Main Street is that it got people on Main Street we know, but it also got people in our stores that otherwise wouldn't have gone into those stores. And that's one of the things that Tanya picked up from talking with the people that own the stores, is they were really surprised, and the parents were surprised. They're like, wow, we didn't know you had this here. And the other thing it did, it also showed you that people will walk from down by the police station, and they'll walk all the way down to the other end of Main Street. It's not that far of a walk. So it got a lot of things done with that. But the special events, we also had January jams, and the town-wide yard sales. We've done things to help groups host the special events, and so it's been pretty successful. We just had a couple weeks ago, we had a car show. It was the first one on Main Street in quite a while. We've done a few things like that that really help bring people to town. The other thing with Valley Street and traffic calming, one of the issues with Valley Street was there was a continual complaint of people speeding on the street, and unfortunately, the way that road was set up, it's just a big wide piece of asphalt with no, other than the center lanes, and nothing to delineate or to slow people down. And since the trees that used to be there ain't there no more, we had to do something. So we hired an engineer to come in and tell us what needed to be done. And with that, we've added lines to help visually narrow the road, but also clearly delineate parking, so people are now parking on Main Street, parking on Valley Street, that otherwise would have parked on Main Street or complained there was no parking. So we've kind of addressed that to some extent. And then the other end is we added mileage to the VDOT roads. So one of the things that we do with the towns, we maintain the roads, as you'll see on Main Street, was just repaved, and they're also restriping that stuff. So we maintain that, and staff has worked hard with DOT in order to add to our mileage. And by adding to our mileage, it adds to how much we get reimbursed, and then it also adds, DOT has increased the amount they're paying per mile, so it's worked out pretty good for us. And if you've driven around town, you notice we just repainted a whole bunch of lines, and they did a lot of work with the DOT, and staff does an awesome job working with those folks. And we've also received loans on the sanitary sewer. That's a big project, a multi-year project, but we've received several different funding sources for that. And we're looking at 0% interest and 75% loan forgiveness in some of the loans. And so we're in a really good place to help maintain our sewer system. This is of our current budget. As I mentioned, we had a potential fund balance usage and all. And right now, as of this morning, I just got fresh numbers this morning, and we're in a really good spot as far as that goes. We're looking at finishing the year with an estimated $192,000 budget surplus instead of the $2.2 million worth of fund balance usage, the $2 million in fund balance, $200,000 in ARPA money. We're actually going to finish the year at roughly 192 without having to use that. So it's been an exceptional year. But a lot of that is because the way staff operates, and when this budget was done, it was largely fully funded, which means that positions were funded. There wasn't a lot of there's different ways to do a budget, but this way it was set up so that we could actually hire the positions that were existing in the budget, and that's a good thing, because we're pretty close to fully hired now. So on the new budget, the budget proposal, what we're looking at is it's a total of $20.273 million. There's 3.3 of general property taxes, and then you've got other local taxes at 8.913, and permits, fines, and forfeiture. All in all, it's a pretty flat across the board budget. The property taxes, there's no recommended increases on there. There's a potential fund balance usage of 1.349 billion, and then there's some loan proceeds. That's just because how some things are financed. Yeah, and then on expenditures, obviously the largest chunk of our budget is our personnel, and that's just that way in almost every organization like ours. And then the other ones are operating expenses and some transfers. You have debt service. Part of that is the Meadows has debt service, and we have several different loans that we look at on a continual basis, and they have those. We pay them down depending on how they're financed. Then we have money for boards and commissions. The biggest chunk of that this year is the Arts Commission, which is new, but it gives the Arts Commission a way to allocate where the funds go, or to recommend to council where the funds go. We have some capital projects, which is the things that are ongoing. We have we said the pump track. We have capital and capital projects, but we have some of the stuff is like building maintenance, and then there's also the contingency there of $58,500. So, and this is the the general summary, and this you guys all have a copy of the budget. The general summary is basically the same, except for we're slightly ahead of where we were last month or a few weeks ago. Like I said, it's instead of being, this one was projected to be about 179 to the good. This is actually going to be 192 to the good. It all depends, because we've done projections as of Friday afternoon, and we're in a real good spot as far as our economically sensitive taxes and everything. We won't know exactly until a couple weeks after after the fiscal year changes, because the lodgings, they can mail those in, so they're not always instantaneous. So, and yeah, so the biggest change to the budget is what Public Works does. We currently have an ordinance that says that we're supposed to collect garbage and solid waste from every place in town, and we don't. And so what this budget does is is to fund picking up all the garbage. So it's roughly 600 new customers. We're going through with staff trying to figure out exactly how many, because some are townhouses and all. We're still trying to identify exactly how many it's going to be. But by doing that, it'll make it a whole lot easier on our Public Works folks, because instead of having to figure out who's where, and then our garbage collection is a better rate than what the private sector charges anyway, so it should be reasonably decent. One thing we have found in town, and namely it's like Tanya will see them, is there'll be people like loading, they'll take in their own garbage because they don't have garbage collection at their house. They've opted out for some reason. And then they're dumping their trash at restaurants, they're dumping trash at the visitor center or at the farmer's market. And that's just all, it's just not a good way to operate. And so, especially if you're a business owner and you go out there and you find the dumpster you're paying for, and you find someone else loading their stuff in there. Yeah, and also on the sewer fund, we've gone through that. I mean, there's a slight adjustment. Steve, do you have the exact on that?
5%.
What's that?
5.
Yeah, 5%, and that was working with.
The Davenport recommendation.
Yeah, so, yeah, working with Davenport, going through, seeing what our debt service is gonna be, and some of the projects we've got oncoming, it'll be a 5% increase as far as the sewer fund goes. And then, yeah, this was one other point, is on full-time employees. One of the things that we have found is there's gotta be a sweet spot somewhere on employees. Now, we don't have the sewer fund employees anymore because they're not in the general fund. But we're trying to figure out exactly where we need to be. And so if you go back several years, you saw we had 110 employees, then 102, 97, 85, and those 85 is after the COVID. And now we're back to 98. We're trying to fine tune this exactly where we're supposed to be, staff wise. And what I found is that we've got a great staff. They work very, very hard. But one of the challenges that we have is continual turnover, and that's something we're trying to avoid. And so part of what this number shows is like in fiscal year 21, you had 85 employees, you had 14 addition, and you had 18 leave, so you got a net of 81. And then your average number of employees, but a churn rate of 22%. But in fiscal year 22 was a churn of 45%, and that's just it's an untenably, you can't operate that way. It's just very expensive. And from a customer service perspective, one of the things that I always look at is, if any old citizen calls town hall, they need help, they're going to get the help they want. And so the idea here really is that there's some level of familiarity, and if employees spend more than a couple of years there, they have a better idea of, who you are, where the residents are, what the town looks for, and what the quality and level of service we're looking for is. And so, like I mentioned earlier, I'm just over a year now with the town, and if you go back to our employees and our total number of employees, the breakdown is pretty large on people with less than 3 years of experience with the town. Now, some of them have more experience in life, but less experience with the town. But from a level of service perspective, it's just a nicer thing when you have someone you call, it's a familiar voice, and they know who you are, and all that kind of stuff. And so what we're trying to be able to do is to build a culture where we can, instead of constantly turning them over, is to keep people and develop the folks. And, an example of that is with when the assistant manager position was filled, rather than hire someone in from the outside, we're promoted internally and we're developing the staff in that department. And so the idea there is that they'll see a future for themselves, and then we'll be able to develop and hopefully retain them so they'll spend their career here, because if they're really lucky, they'll get to spend a lot of time here. This is a heck of a nice place. So we're trying to build that culture here. And that's the end of that PowerPoint there. So with that, if you have any questions in specific, or specific questions?
Okay, is there any, well, I guess first I need to ask if we have a motion to approve the budget.
I have a motion I'd like to make. I moved the budget line identified as use of general fund reserves be renamed council appropriation, expenditures to be approved by the town council. And I've got some reasons, but the main reason is I want to go back to this report right here that was sent to us on April the 28th. According to the report council received on 4/28/23, the employee wages, taxes, and benefits have gone from a budgeted $6.5 million in 2022 to a budgeted $8.6 million in 23 budget, an increase of $2.1 million. This expenditure is forecasted to end the fiscal year on June 30th on this report, 7.9. But I found out this morning it ended at 7.33. Okay, based on the forecast, the proposed 2024 budget adds an additional 1.140158 to the 2024 wages, taxes, and benefits line. To break it down, the wages, taxes, and benefits have increased by $2.6 million in 2 years. The benefits line for 2023 is forecasted to be 33% of the employee wages. This is the report that was sent to us on April 28th. And this is not sustainable with our current revenue collections. So I just want to make a motion that this use of our general fund reserves be appropriated to council, either council contingency or just a council appropriation. I'd like to make that motion.
Okay, and I guess according to Robert's rules, then I ask for a second for the motion.
I'll second her motion.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, so I have a question and I have a request. I understand the reason for doing this. I would like to make the request, and I guess that I would have to make another motion, that if we do this.
For this one first, I think.
Okay.
We have a second.
Say what you're gonna say, and then
Yeah.
I'll tell you how to do it.
Okay. I don't want us to get to a point where we have a project that's held up or a situation that is held up because we haven't appropriated the funds. And that is my concern. And so I would like to say that if we do this, then we have a deadline of January, at which point we assess how we're doing and decide whether or not we're gonna appropriate the funds.
I think we do that on a monthly basis, don't we, Jim?
Yeah, we meet, pardon me, went down the wrong hole, but we meet as a finance committee on a monthly basis, and we're continually looking at revenues, accounts due, and all those sorts of things. So we know pretty close where we're at every single month. And so, it wouldn't be terribly difficult, but at the 6-month mark is kind of where you're, where you would really know where you're at.
Right.
So.
Well, I do want to point out, though, in messages and conversation, it has been said, you're almost positive you're not going to need this money. so.
Oh, no, that's certain, and so as a
Yeah,
general rule,
okay.
when you budget like this, that you're budgeting so that you can run the organization exactly as it appears. Because, like, when I understand, last year, when that budget was passed, you had a whole bunch, you better than 20 positions that were funded but not filled. And, you know, what I try to do is, like I mentioned about the quality of employees and keeping the employees, yeah, part of it is having the employees. And other than, you know, like, on Friday afternoon when I left, we lost one person, but they transferred to another part of the organization. So that created a vacancy. We don't have a lot of churn and vacancies right now. And so if you partially fund personnel, then you're really cutting it back on personnel. The thing that I do is, with staff on a regular basis, is look at the bottom line to figure out where we're at. Because if we go into the first quarter and we realize that we're way under somewhere, well, then we're gonna make some adjustments. That's part of what we do all the time. And so that's why this year, even though we started with a huge hurdle, roughly a 10% or a little better than 10% fund balance potential usage, and we've been prudent with that. And so even though we've achieved a lot of objectives this year, we're still gonna finish the year without touching the fund balance, without touching the 200,000 in ARPA, and finishing with somewhere close to 200,000 in unused money. So we're in a pretty good spot. And the reason we're there is because of staff, because we watch the bottom line all the time. And so if we don't have to hire someone, we won't. But it's a constant challenge, because like one of the biggest things that we do is public works. And people are like, public works, what do they do? Well, look how clean the streets are. We just got our sweeper back, thank goodness. So they do all that stuff, and they keep it looking nice. And as you know, it's a difficult thing to do if you don't have the funds to do it. But again, we won't spend the money if it's not absolutely necessary to spend the money, because it's just not what we do.
Well, I would make a point too, that as council, we're gonna be responsible, and if we need to, use the money, we'll use the money, but it'll
Right.
be, the expenditures will, be put in front of council to make a decision, so I think it's just being a responsible council.
So which account would you take them out of? That's what I'm trying to understand, the mechanics of it.
Well, the line item that's 1349115, the use of the general fund reserves. I believe the end, 191,000, was just, you want to explain? I mean, he said it at the last meeting. That was really the use that was 191,000. But the rest is sort of spelled out with the, budget stabilization and capital projects. And, we don't need to go, I don't think, into a lot of detail. He explained this last time, but the 191,000, explain that
Yeah.
again.
In looking at the budget, you want to be structurally imbalanced, meaning that your general fund revenues are adequate to cover all of your operating expenditures for the year. And this budget, and let's just qualify the expenditure side as being the expenditures necessary to fund the programs and services and government services that people expect, the citizens expect, okay? And this budget is actually structurally in balance from the standpoint of the revenues that we're receiving for the normal operating expenditures to operate the government, okay? The $1.3 million has been discussed before. 868,000, I believe, is a transfer to the capital projects budget to fund capital projects. So that is a use of our unassigned fund balance to self-finance capital projects, not our capital outlays that are incorporated in with our normal expenditures, okay? So the bulk of that 1.3 million is to self-fund capital projects so that we don't have to go out and borrow money right now, because we have the money available and interest rates are very high and we would have to encumber ourselves with additional debt. So that's the biggest part. But then there's an additional 330,000 which we put it in the budget as an expense because of the importance to the council to make sure that we fund a budget stabilization account that had been recommended by the our financial advisors. So we have $5 million, which is a floor that we always want to maintain as an unassigned balance. But the financial advisors recommended an additional 1.25 that we should fund that with, and it comes out of general fund revenue. That's where it comes from. But in order to show the importance, we put that money in the budget. And basically what it says is at the end of the year, okay, we've kind of earmarked it. If all of our expenses and everything else turned out the way we expected it to be, we'd have that $230,000 to put into a separate account called the budget stabilization. So there's 230 of that money coming from the general fund is actually just moving it into a different account. It's not a real expenditure. Then there was $100,000 that Mr. Cochran had suggested for a fleet replacement fund or an account. I don't want to use fund, but an account so that we can, again, we're not really expending it each year, but we're putting that money aside so that in the future, if we have a large purchase, like you mentioned, the garbage truck was $385. Fortunately, the council had the wisdom to use the available ARPA funds at the time to buy that truck. We got it a lot sooner than we thought. We thought we were going to have it 2 years from now, but we got it a lot sooner. So again, that $100,000, although it shows up as an expense, it's not really an expenditure, okay? It's moving it from within the general fund over to a separate account so that we can earmark it for future expenses when we have a fleet replacement of some sort. So you take those things out of that 1.3 million, and you're left with $191,000 that would, on the surface, would appear to be, quote, structurally imbalanced, out of balance, if you will. But again, as I talked before, the council has the prerogative and the duty to say, first of all, we're going to take care of all of our operating expenses, which this budget does. And if we have funds available, and if we have a healthy, unassigned fund balance, then we can use funds for non-departmental purposes, if you will. And that budget includes those non-departmental, non-operating expenses. So that's where the $1.3 million on the revenue comes from. We're self-funding because we're fortunate. We have a healthy general fund unassigned balance. We have a healthy balance in excess of council policies of maintaining a minimum. At this point in time, our minimum should be $5.7 million. But we're fortunate that we have a healthy balance far in excess of that. And so that we're fortunate that we can self-fund some of these capital projects, which are not monthly recurring expenses. These are large capital projects. And so it's certainly reasonable to self-fund those things when you have the resources available so that you don't have to go borrow the money. And again, the other portion is just reallocating, if you will, under a separate account. So the budget itself, with that $192,500 or whatever that number is, close to that, that out of balance aspect of it from an operational perspective is less than 1% of the total budget.
So let me ask this question, and that was an excellent explanation, thank you. Would it be possible to pass this motion and do exactly what Ms. Quetch is suggesting? Go ahead and appropriate the money that is being transferred to the general fund, from the general fund to the budget stabilization fund and the fleet fund, and then I guess we would appropriate the capital projects and that extra
Well,
expenditure.
I just think it's better. I mean, for me, it should be revenues, a balanced budget is revenues equals expenditures, you know? So this is use of the general fund reserves, and I'm just saying, let council appropriate what the use of what they're going to use for the general fund reserves.
And I understand that, but what I'm saying is since some of the general fund reserves, it's all in the same, under the same umbrella, it's just moving accounts, would we prefer to go ahead and appropriate that now or would we prefer to appropriate that at the end of the year? I mean, and does it matter to our bond rating when we do it?
So I'm sorry, just to kind of make sure I'm keeping track of who's asking what, where we are procedurally. What this ordinance does is three different things. One, it adopts a budget. A budget's just a budget by statute. It's just for informational purposes only. The second thing is literally to appropriate the money. So you're saying this is the amount of money that staff has to spend. So that's the second thing. I think you guys are kind of commingling those ideas a little bit. And then the third one is to set the tax rate, and I guess maybe the fourth thing is to say when it starts. So I think what Ms. Quetch is saying is this line item that now says that the budget is both going to budget and also appropriate this $1.3 million is held back to council. And if there are capital projects or that sort of thing, then staff will come and say, and as a practical matter, if we're going to pave a street or something, then Mike's going to have to bid it out and council's going to have to vote on that anyway. And I think that you guys are saying that we're segregating it for accounting purposes and not really going to use it
Yeah,
anyway without
that's right.
council voting on it.
That's right.
As opposed to saying that we're definitely going to use that. I think what you're saying is we're probably not actually going to
Yeah,
use
not
the
gonna use it.
1.3. So I think that, sorry, Steve, that nobody's really asking for the money to be appropriated to be spent at the moment.
That's right. That's right.
Particularly on the fund transfers, okay? I think probably lesson learned, we have the fund balance, the unassigned fund balance that we have right now is adequate for us to go ahead and just move it into another account that says budget stabilization, which we already have. And we have the $5 million some odd thousand dollars as a, we call it a reserve, but it's really kind of, we shouldn't call it a reserve, the $5 million. But we have that, and it's in an account. That's part of the unassigned general fund balance. Right now, we could go ahead and make the 750 125, okay? $1,250,000. We'll move that over. It's still part of the unassigned general fund balance. It's just segregated. And then we would still have money in the general fund that, over and above that policy, okay? So that money, Cam, is not really appropriated. It's just moving it from one account to the other. So for me, lesson learned is we should just
I
go
think
ahead
I'm
and
trying
run it,
to
take
say-
it out of the budget, $330,000, take that out of the, it's earmarked as an expense, but it really isn't. So you take that out of the expense line, take it out of the revenue line. Now you're down to the little over $1 million. And of that $1 million, 800 and some odd thousand is for capital projects, which are included in the capital projects budget. And so if you're not going to appropriate that money, that $858,000, if you're not going to appropriate that money in the general, from the general fund to the capital projects fund, then the capital projects fund budget would not be approved, correct?
Well, my point was, I think you're both saying the same thing. I think it's just semantics on how you label that money. And so I think what Ms. Quetch is saying is, and to roll in what I think Mayor Pillion is saying is, council doesn't want you to have to come in and say, Mr. Cochran to come in every month and say, we need toilet paper this week, we run out of money, there's no money in the checking account. And that's not what either of you are saying, and I don't think that's
It's not
what
what we're saying.
Donna or anybody else is saying. And I think what you're ultimately saying, Steve, is just for, mostly for planning purposes, is to say, look, we have all this money in this one account, this is what we're structuring it for that could be spent on. And I think what Donna is asking for is to say, look, if we're really going to spend that money, if you're going to say there's a capital projects money for $1 million, that you come to council, and you'd have to come to council for that because of procurement law and all the other things that we have to, the council has to approve anyway. So I think you're saying the same thing.
Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah, at
that
the
was
end
a
of the day, I
very,
guess
very
then
long-winded
We just wouldn't
lawyer
have an
way to say it.
approved
but-
capital projects budget.
Right.
Because, you know, we advertise a general fund budget, the capital projects budget, the ARPA budget, and the sewer budget. So we advertise for those 4 budgets, looking for the appropriation for those things. Now, within the capital budget, when you look at the capital budget, the funding sources for all those capital projects, the pump track, the skills track, the Latcher Field lighting, and that list of capital projects, the funding sources for those come from, the bulk of it comes from a transfer from the general fund to cover that. That's the self-financing part. But then there's also grants that we're receiving from the state, from the county, and those are in that budget as well. And so, you know, I don't know how that would be.
Or like happened this year, and I think what Mr. Cochran is saying is, we're all hopeful that happens, is that meals and lodgings tax is $1 million more than you projected it to be. And so
Right.
you're not talking about using reserves really in physically writing checks in terms of what council is appropriating to spend that particular money to begin with. So I think everybody's saying the same thing, and I don't think the things that you're concerned about, that's what they're worried about, or that's what Ms. Quetch is worried about, but
Okay.
I don't have a vote, I'm just trying to make
Help
sure that
us.
whatever
Yes.
motion is being made, that everybody understands what it is that we're trying to say and how that's gonna affect anything. And I think the answer is, so I guess to put that back to you, if for planning purposes, if use of the general fund reserves was allocated to these particular things, to fleet maintenance, blah, 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 as long as nobody writes an actual physical check for that money, then you would be fine with that structure.
I would be
Is that
fine
right?
with that structure, but what brought me here is the fact that this year, $2.2 million, they say they didn't need. Now they say they're not gonna need this, they know for sure they're not gonna need this. So I guess my point is let's just let council have some control here of their budget, you know?
So we would have control, well, and ultimately, we do have control of the budget.
Yes, we do.
Ultimately, this budget is a living, breathing document, and we can pass the budget today, and we can amend the budget in our meeting, you know, in July. And then we can amend it again in August, and so we can amend the budget at any point in time. But and I want you to, I'm summarizing, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. So what you're saying is, we will pass the budget with the caveat that we are appropriating, when we get to the end, if we actually have to go over and use $1.3 million from the general fund, then we will appropriate that money at the time.
Yeah.
Is that legal, Cam? Okay. I'm just making sure I'm not missing something here.
And,
So-
and I think, like I'm saying, the way it's kind of laid out is budget and appropriating, that you're just appropriating the money that's in the budget. And I think what Donna is saying is that if there's truly going to be use of that, this budget ordinance would be amended to say, instead of use of general fund reserves, it's going to say council contingency, I think is how historically that's been done.
Okay.
Or council appropriations or something. And so if it came to a point where the money that's earmarked in the general fund reserve account is used, then staff will have to come and ask
Yeah.
council to approve.
Could we pass the budget and just put that $1.3 million in a council appropriations fund
Or
for purposes of
council
budgeting,
contingency.
and then pass the budget as is?
Yeah, if I could make a suggestion
Mhm.
to maybe clean it up a little bit, and that is, again, recognizing that 230,000 and the $100,000 are not truly appropriations, they're not expenses. If we could get the consensus of the council, I can go back to my office today and basically put money from that's in the general fund, put it in the budget stabilization fund, fully fund it, take it out of the budget, strike the line item as an expense for budget stabilization, strike the line item for a fleet replacement fund, okay? Just put them in the account. They're still, we're not spending it, it's just all there. Remove those from the expenditure lines, and then remove it from the top line. And then that would leave us right about $1 million. And that $1 million, again, would be for the capital project. So if we had a capital project, we come for appropriation from the council to fund that particular project. And then the $192,000, which is over and above our actual expenses, those are the non-departmentals, we could come before the council and the council could go, yes, we want to appropriate this amount of money, this 200,000 for these non-departmentals.
Okay.
And then that leaves the operational portion of the budget intact. Just a suggestion.
Because the way you explained it this morning to us was that we have account A, B, C, D, and they're separate bank accounts, but they're all under the
They're all in the
umbrella
same
of the
one.
unrestricted general fund.
Exactly.
So even though it's a line item in the budget, we're just moving the money from one account to
And we'll
another.
just, yeah, because it's not really an expense, it was just a placeholder, you know. But if we go ahead and fund it now and say our general fund balance is made up of 5 million here, 1.25 million here, $100,000 for fleet maintenance, and then 2 point whatever million dollars, that's what makes up our unassigned balance. And we haven't spent it, we're not gonna spend it unless it's appropriated. That would be my suggestion.
Well,
We wouldn't have,
And
we
how-
wouldn't have to amend this fiscal year's budget. Would that be over 1% of what you were changing?
The 300,000?
Or
No,
just-
because it's already in the fund. It's not an expense, it's just, it's keeping it, it's just moving it from
One place to another.
one bank account. It's all within VIP. It's just like, it's not really an expense. I
So
think
then we
that's
would
what's-
appropriate the capital funds as needed.
Yes, the capital fund and then.
So that
the-
last $1 million, we would appropriate as needed.
Right, for the
Non-departmentals
capital
and the-
projects and then the non-departmental.
And if Donna is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're all, I agree with Kim, I think we're all saying the same thing, but in different ways. But what you're saying is, when we get to the point that we are short that much money in the bank and we need to spend it, that's when they come to us.
I'm saying, they say they're not gonna use it, so why would we give it to them at all until, you know, that's what I'm saying. They didn't use this 2.2.
Okay, so just to sum it up and to move forward and to wrap it all up
Yeah.
and do the business that we need to do, these are our choices. We vote on the motion at hand, and the motion at hand is to pass the budget but appropriate the $1.3 million as needed
Council contingency.
in council contingency. And my question is, do we go ahead and appropriate those non-departmentals now and all of that, or do we just wait?
We wait.
Okay. And I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, I just wanna have a full understanding of what I'm doing. So that means that, say, for the Arts Commission, we're not gonna appropriate them their money that we told them.
No, they're
No.
gonna have the money. They say they don't need the money.
Okay.
I think to answer your question, Steve, is for budget purposes, it's all in general fund. So
Yeah,
it
it's all in
doesn't
the
really
general
matter.
So we don't
for
take
them
that-
Passing for the budget. If you put it in sub-accounts or whatever, as long as it rolls up in the audit to general fund,
It's all there, right?
I don't think council needs to vote on that. I don't think that part matters. But if it gets to the, think what she's saying, and that's what the motion is, and so now you're withdrawing your informal request for her to amend her motion is where we
Right.
are.
So what Donna is saying is the 1.3,
Goes
we,
into-
if we get to the point that we have to spend $1.3 extra million
Yeah.
out of the general fund, she wants us to appropriate that
Yeah.
money before
Well,
we
Yeah.
spend.
again, to clean it up, and again, mine wasn't, the $330,000, I'm suggesting keep the amendment, but reduce it to the 1 million, because we can move those over already within the general fund, and it just cleans it up, because.
It's not going anywhere, it's not leaving our
Right,
bank accounts.
Right, because, to your point, we wouldn't come to the council and say, can I move $100 from this checking account to this savings account? Because it's all within the general fund, it's not an expenditure, it's not an appropriation.
So what line of the expense would that come out of then, Steve?
On the expenditure side, we have we have it listed as a budget stabilization of 230. It's in the at the very end of the expenditure budget.
Well, didn't this same thing happen last year with the budget? Same thing, budget stabilization, capital improvements, and you didn't need it. Same thing.
I'm not against your motion. I'm
Okay,
just
good.
trying to understand the way that it all is
Yeah,
working. That's
okay.
the only reason I'm answering questions. It's not to challenge you or
Okay.
to disagree with you. It is to clarify what we're doing. I just want to know that I want to understand it. And as I've stated before, my work background is not in finance, so I have to ask a lot of questions to make sure that I'm on the same page as everybody whose background is.
I think for where we are right now, it would be easier just to do with the numbers that we have, and you can always come back and amend the budget
Yeah.
if needed. And I think, Steve, honestly, that you could probably do that anyway. I don't think that changes the way it rolls up to begin with, as long as it's all staying in the general fund.
Yeah, it's in the general
So if we
fund.
vote for Donna's motion, what we are saying is, if we get to the point that we have to spend $1.3 million out of the general fund, meaning that the general fund balance, the unassigned general fund balance decreases by $1.3 million, then we have to appropriate that money.
Yeah,
That is what you're saying?
that's what I'm saying.
Okay. And everybody else is clear that that's what we're saying? So then all of that we just talked about doesn't really matter because it's still in the general fund?
Right.
Okay? Okay. So, is there any further discussion on this motion? And then I also, before we vote, I would like to also make sure that everybody on council and the public who is listening understands that the budget is a living, breathing document. So we can amend and change the budget at any point, not even at a meeting. We can call a meeting to amend and change the budget. So, so we are passing a budget, but it is not carved in stone. Okay, so if we've had enough discussion, then Kim, if you will please call the roll and we will vote on the ordinance.
Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Pili.
Aye. Okay, now we have a consideration of bids. And there's a bid for Ken Construction for $1,103,000, $1,103,308 for Virginia Creeper Trail trestle repairs. And we have Michael Surratt, the Director of Public Works.
Madam Mayor, council members, in March, we received a single bid for our trestle repair RFP, and it was over the budget, over the budgeted amount, I should say. And we went back to our consultant, Prosum, and did some value engineering with the contractor who submitted the budget, and we did bring it back into the existing budget of $1,103,308 to do the trestle repairs through value engineering. It is the town's staff recommendation that we accept the bid so we can get this project funded. And this project is funded through the ARPA funds.
Okay.
Any questions, comments?
Thanks for your hard work getting that to a manageable level within the budget.
Yes, we appreciate that. Is there any, or do we have any more questions? If not, I will entertain a motion to accept the bid for the Virginia Creeper Trail trestle repairs.
So move.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
So the motion was made by Mr. Webb. It was seconded by Vice Mayor Anderson. Is there any discussion on this matter? If there is no discussion, Kim, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Pili.
Aye. Okay. Thank you very much. Now we have new business to discuss. It is a discussion regarding the First Amendment to Declaration of Restrictive Covenants and Reciprocal Access Easement Agreement to Marathon Realty in the town of Abingdon. And we once again have Ms. Mayana Rice.
I got a little break there in the middle. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. So this item is, again, Marathon Realty is requesting this item. It is an amendment to the Declaration of Restrictive Covenants and Reciprocal Access Easement Agreement. So in 2017, as most of you know, there was an agreement that was made between Marathon Realty and the town of Abingdon. At that time, basically their development was occurring, the Meadows land was being allocated, and in other forms of this, you probably would have had something called a PUD or a PUD, where it was sort of just a master plan of the area. What we created instead were covenants. And so basically it says there's an agreement between Marathon Realty and the town of Abingdon over all of this land. So it functions very much like if there was a master plan. But because of that, anytime there is a request for a change, it does have to come back to you, and it does have to go back through them, rather than, say, the Planning Commission or something of that nature. So what their first request is that there is in Exhibit F1, there's a limitation on the sale of certain items related to equipment and tools. They want to basically change that to allow future retail, and that future retail would have outdoor storage and sales lots. So if you look in your packet, the first paragraph under Exhibit F1 says mobile home sales, automobile sales, boat sales, motorcycle sales, and all other motorized, trailered, and/or jet-propelled vehicle sales. So that's something that's not permitted in the development. Neither the foregoing restriction nor anything else contained in this Exhibit F1 shall preclude, restrict, or otherwise limit in any way, and this is what they would like to add, the operation of hardware and/or tool stores such as Ace Hardware, True Value, Harbor Freight, Northern Tool and Equipment, or other similar uses within the development. So what they're saying is these quite specific restrictions on the types of sales that they're allowed to do essentially would potentially prohibit someone coming in and having an outdoor sales lot like a Harbor Freight or a True Value. So they're asking for that as their first request, to add the caveat that any tool stores or hardware stores such as Ace Hardware, True Value, Harbor Freight, Northern Tool and Equipment, or other similar uses could now be allowed in that plaza. So that's the first request. The second request that they're asking for is that, again, in Exhibit F1, paragraph 2, that there actually be a distinguishing factor between a tire oil change facility and a service garage with major repair. So right now, it says vehicle service garages with major repair, whether undercover or otherwise, would not be permitted, would be prohibited. What they would ask you to request or ask you to amend is neither the foregoing restriction nor anything else contained in this Exhibit F shall preclude, restrict, or otherwise limit in any way the operation of vehicle service and/or tire centers such as Firestone Complete, Auto Care, Pet Boys, Valvoline Instant Oil Change, Discount Tire, Jiffy Lube, Take 5 Oil Change, tire discounters, or other similar uses within the development. So they want to distinguish that a major car repair shop would still not be permitted. But if you did want to approve, or if they wanted to sell a lot to, say, a Pet Boys that is doing basically oil changes and tire changes, that they could sell a lot to them. So those are the two requests. One is to allow a hardware store or a Harbor Freight or other tools, and the second is to allow instant oil change and car repair shops and distinguish those from major car repair. So one of the things that I will say is that, and most of you know how hard we worked through with the Planning Commission on the car wash project that went round and around, and Donna got to participate in that one, on the requiring the exterior to be brick. So your Planning Commission does a really good job of ensuring that if something is designed in there, that it's going to be designed well. So I would say that if you do decide to change these things, you still have that additional level of review, which is where this becomes, a working document, so that the Planning Commission can say, no, you're going to have tires outside, they have to be screened. No, we're not going to have a long blank wall facing the meadows, ball fields. You've got to add some windows and some other features. So the design still ends up in the hands of an additional level of review with your Planning Commission. So one of the reasons that we're bringing this to you, we do agree that this is the type of thing that the town manager would end up signing, and he can assign this amendment to the document. But bringing this to you, as it's not the entirely same council that it was when these original covenants went into place, was the path that our legal suggested. So if you have any additional questions, again, the representative from Marathon is here, but if not, I can try to answer anything as well.
I have one question.
Yeah.
And this is just one that has been expressed to me, which would be, does the planning commission also talk about any noise ordinances? So if, say, there was a vehicle repair shop that had lots of noise, is that something that would be considered by the planning commission and restricted?
It can be considered. It is not part of design, but we definitely have a noise ordinance on hand in general. So I will say, and again, I'll let the applicant ask and probably explain a little more, but I did do some just general research looking at the Aldi that's down at the Falls, and right next to it, I'm not sure if it's a Firestone Pet Boys or whatever that is, but it doesn't have any exterior storage. So when the doors roll down, you know, they don't have cars sitting in the parking lot that are junky old cars. They don't have outdoor storage of any type. So while the noise and while the design of the building could be part of the planning commission's approval, and they could ask for additional interior sound buffering types of things, they could also talk about times of the day, so whether or not it's operational late at night. But our strict noise ordinance is in a separate section, so, yeah.
Good question, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any other questions for Mr. Ice or for Marathon about this situation? And you are very welcome to speak.
I'm happy to answer your question. Stephen Spangler, Marathon Realty Corporation. Marathon is a wholly owned subsidiary of KVAT, so it's effectively Food City. Really, our position are these are allowed uses. They're allowed under the underlying zoning B2. We're just trying to clarify, just to make sure as we sell properties and even develop properties for ourselves that we're covered. So that's why we reached out to Mayan and worked with Mayan and her staff to ensure that we're going down the right path. So happy to answer any questions, but as she stated, absolutely, both of the uses for Lot 3 or 7, one being the easement that you just granted would come through the Planning Commission for COA and obviously would have to abide by the DECR as far as design requirements. So happy to answer any questions yet.
We appreciate your forward thinking and thinking ahead, because that certainly prevents future problems.
Sure. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for your consideration.
Are there any other questions? Any more discussion? Okay, so I will entertain a motion to change these development restrictions.
I'll make that motion.
Do you have a second?
I'll second that.
And can I suggest that you add to that, you authorize the town manager to sign such documents and legal counsel to prepare any
I do all
required
that too.
documents?
Yes.
And I'll second that as well, too.
Okay, is there any discussion? Okay, if there is no discussion, then the motion was made by Ms. Webb. It was seconded by Vice Mayor Anderson. Kim, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Austin?
Aye.
Ms. Quetch?
Aye.
Mr. Webb?
Abstain.
Would you like to state a reason?
Yes, they will.
Yes, as I stated before earlier, Food City is my employer, so just out of an abundance of caution, so there's no conflict of interest, I will abstain.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Anderson?
Aye.
And Mayor Pillion?
Aye. Okay, so now we will move on to old business, of which we have none. And now we will go on to miscellaneous business and communications from the town manager. A request to transfer funds from the Abingdon Fire Department to the Abingdon Firefighter Foundation as a 501c3. And we have Chief Tim Estes from the Abingdon Fire Department.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Members of council, staff. Thanks for allowing us to be here today. If you allow me to just give you a very brief history of why we're here today and how we got here. In about 1952, the town of Abingdon decided that they needed to reimburse their volunteer firefighters for answering fire calls. And the way they did that, the fire department would keep track of hours. They would turn that pay request to the town would write a check. And in order to write a check, we had to have a checking account. That's way before my time. I didn't join then. Came much later. Yeah, I figured we'd get that. So during this period of time, our members paid dues. So we paid to be a member of the fire department for a lot of years. So for more than 20 years that I've been on the fire department, for more than 20 years I paid to be on the fire department. We would pay 2 calls a month. We took that money and that's how we had hamburger cookouts and fish fries and a benevolent fund. If someone had an issue and they needed some help, we would help them. Not just our members, but the general public and other fire departments as well. Roll forward to about the mid-2010s. IRS rules changed. We could no longer be reimbursed, and we had to be paid and had to pay taxes on the money that we were being reimbursed. We then became part-time employees of the town, and so we turn in that monthly payroll. Every 2 weeks I turn that in. We still have a checking account. Every month I account to Steve and his staff in finance how much money we have in our checking account, how it has been spent, because that's a best business practice for accounting purposes. There is no local government money in this checking account. Our members work the Bristol racetrack. All the money they receive working there, they donated that back to that account. So we have established a 501c3, and I've asked, Carl Blankenship is one of my firefighters. He's also the treasurer of the fire department. The fire department currently has a president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. We thought it was best, after talking with Steve, that we create a 501c3, which we have done, the Abingdon Firefighters Foundation Incorporated. And Carl will talk about what the purpose of that foundation is, but our request today is to allow us to take money that belongs to the members of the fire department but is accounted for under the town's tax ID number, and allow that to be donated to the foundation. It basically just cleans up the books, and we don't have to account for that with the town books anymore. So, Cardinal.
Mayor, council members, so I won't bore you with a lot, just a small excerpt out of our articles of incorporation about what exactly our foundation is set up to do. So specifically, the Abingdon Firefighters Foundation is dedicated to enhancing emergency services for Abingdon residents, visitors, and the surrounding communities by promoting the efforts of the Abingdon Firefighters Foundation, providing opportunities for partnerships with other community organizations to support the efforts of the Abingdon Firefighters Foundation, and raising funds to support the Abingdon Firefighters Foundation. As Chief Estes mentioned, our request is to get those funds moved out of the town account and into our foundation account. And as of today, this morning, that current balance is $8,087.52. So where we stand today. So looking for your approval to get that moved over to us, or the foundation rather.
Do you have any questions? Sounds like you guys have done all the legwork and all of your homework. If there are no questions, then I will entertain a motion to fulfill this request.
So moved.
I'll second that motion as well, too.
Okay, so the motion was made by Mr. Webb, seconded by Vice Mayor Anderson. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Austin.
Aye.
Ms. Quetch.
Aye.
Mr. Webb.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Anderson.
Aye.
And Mayor Pillion.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for all the things you do for us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that brings us to council member
I
reports.
think Mike says.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike. I ran right over you. I'm so sorry.
It's
You probably have
okay,
more
it's
things to talk
okay.
about.
Yeah, the Tim had a
Sorry.
lot of really exciting stuff to go on there. But speaking of exciting, July 1st is our July 4th celebration. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to move some events that will actually bring some folks to town. And for the sake of a calendar, we're going to have the 4th of July fireworks will be on July 1st, which will be a Saturday. And it's going to be at the Visitor Center lawn on Main Street, and also the Abington Farmers Market on Remsburg Drive. Starting at 1 p.m., we'll have the Remsburg street closure. I'll email this out as well, and it'll go up on the internet. From 1:30 to 6 p.m., there's going to be a cornhole tournament with some prizes out there. And then at 3 o'clock, there'll be a cornbread fritter eating contest.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not as exciting as a donut eating contest, but I'm sure that we have the technology to make that one happen. And that's going to be right behind the Bonefire Smokehouse. And then from 1 p.m. to 1:45, the Visitor Center lawn, we've got the Fairview Homestead will be out there, the Historical Society of Washington County, Crafts with Abington Visitor Center staff, the Isaiah 117 house, Abington Muster Grounds reenactors, Hambone Entertainment balloon twisting and cartoon drawings, Holston Mountain Artisan and artisan demos, the Alline Black face painting. I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds like they're going to paint little kids' faces. And then at 6 p.m. is Spot of Color and Kids Crafts. And then at the pavilion, we're going to have 3 p.m. It'll be student essay reading. 3:30 is going to be the Magic of Dave Vaught, local magician. We have live music with Adam Bolt and the Mullins Family Tree from 4 to 5:30. And Adam is on Spotify. If people are sitting at home saying, "Who is Adam Bolt?" just go to Spotify and enter Adam.
He's a legend.
And you'll find
He's a
Adam.
legend.
Yeah,
He's a
and
legend.
yeah, and just bring a Coke. That's all. And then at 5:30 is the Magic of the Dave Vault. We got our reading of the Declaration of Independence 6:15, 6:30 live country with Caitlin Crisco and the broadcast, and at 9:30 fireworks. And the fireworks will be behind the police station at Latcher Field. Bring a blanket and a chair and enjoy all the activities. And again, that's going to be on Saturday the 1st of July. So that's all I have. And thank you for all your participation and everything. I appreciate that.
You need peanuts for your Coke, too?
What was that?
You need peanuts for your Coke.
Oh, peanuts for that Coke, I'm told. Adam didn't tell me about the peanuts, but yeah, you need peanuts for that Coke. So. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
So now we'll move on to council member reports. I apologize for doing that to you.
Well, Mike just touched up on a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, and that was the 4th of July setup. Just to let everybody know that fireworks will be set off in the town of Abington July the 1st, not July the 4th. Let's say the week of June the 10th, Campbell's birthday, I had the honor of going to the Barter Theater and enjoying the 90th birthday with the Barter crew, all the actors, and Katie Brown and everyone over there. It was a delight to be there in the morning time with the kids, everyone there with the kids from the Robin Hood. And then we went from the Robin Hood to later on that day to dinner on the lawn where Councilman Austin was there as well too. And we gave a proclamation to the Barter Theater. In return, we went to the Footloose show, which was a success. I just think the Barter's doing great things for Abington, and we're lucky to have the Barter on our side. Also, I've done a lot. Sorry about that. Historic Society. I was invited last week to join in on a little African heritage. I learned a lot there. I think that the Historic Society at Abington does a great job with what they do down there. If anyone is wanting to know about your ancestors or to try to find out any history on Abington, I highly recommend going to the Historic Society. Those guys down there really do a good job. Mark Hagee and the crew down there, they do a wonderful job. If you have any questions, I think that they open at 10 o'clock. They're open from 10 until 4 down there. They're really willing to help anyone seek any kind of history or whatever you're looking for there. So, a lot to offer there.
I was at the opening of the Abington Fiddler Convention. It was a huge success also, and it's just growing each year. And the Infrastructure Committee, Mike did a great job last month sort of updating us on all the projects. We have another meeting coming up soon. Finance Committee, we got to hopefully, today sort of gives us a little bit of relief moving forward. So I guess that's all.
Mike, when is Cummings Street going to be closed at exit 17? You put it in one of your emails.
So that's a sliding scale because it changes daily. Mike?
Yes, sir. So he got originally approached us about July the 10th through the 12th. They called me the other day, and now the contractor who's there if I might want to do it on the 17th. I'm waiting for the work to be done at this point. But it is going to be a 72-hour closure for them to do the work underneath the bridges right there, so it'll be totally closed. But they do have a maintenance of traffic detour set up for the traffic. It's going to be a little bit of an inconvenience, but it's just something that they have to do, and they can't do it in pieces. They have to take the whole road up because they believe there's unsuitable material underneath the existing road. They're going to have to remove it the whole way back.
And so that said, once we know exactly, because it gets a sliding, moving target, once we know exactly, as soon as we get the firm date, we'll let y'all know, put it out on social media.
So those coming from South Abingdon, will you be able to enter the northbound ramp and go up to?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So basically, the detour that they have, Councilman Austin, was those coming to the north, enter onto the interstate, go up to 19, and if you want to come back and get on Cummings Street, you can come back down and get off at 17
Right.
and proceed north on Cummings Street. And those coming south on Cummings Street will only be able to enter onto the southbound side.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to follow up on Dwayne's comment about the Barter Theater. He was a great ambassador for the town on the stage. He was thrown in the mix with a lot of politicians on stage. I thought the things that he said and the way that he conducted himself were just excellent. I was very proud of the things that he did. So, good job.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Having been out of town for half of June, I haven't been involved in a lot. I was gone for a couple of weeks. But I do not have any new news for the tree commission. We did not meet this month.
Well, I've been at several things, but what I would like to do is just thank our town staff and thank our council members. Everybody's been very busy. It's been a busy summer. We've had some very robust discussions, sometimes tense, sometimes not, involving this budget. I'd like to thank our financial department. They have explained things over and over and over and made them very clear for us, and I appreciate all of their hard work and the town manager's hard work on the budget. Appreciate council members' hard work, really digging in. Like I said, my background is in healthcare, so I have learned a lot this budget season, and I appreciate everybody's willingness to help me learn. It's been great. But Coombs Center staff, the Meadows staff, our public works have been out working and making our town look beautiful. The HPRB, code enforcement, the planning commission, everybody who works for the town is doing such a great job. And I had a lot of company during the month of May, and a lot of people who had never been here before, and all anybody can ever say is what a perfect little Hallmark town you live in. So that's a testament to everybody who works for the town, as well as my fellow council members. So thank you all very much.
And the quality of guests.
Yes, well, they obviously have really good taste. So anyway, if that's all, then I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I did.